I'm with Sandy Powell and Christopher Peterson, who are the Oscar-nominated costume designers for The Irishman. And I'm at Noel from Gold Derby, here to ask, Sandy, this is your 15th Oscar nomination. Christopher, it's your first. So I'd like to hear from each of you. What's it like being nominated a 15th time, Sandy? And what's it like being nominated for your first time, Chris?
Well, it's just as exciting being nominated for the 15th time as it was for the 14th and the 13th and the first. So I'm thrilled and excited.
And I've not stopped grinning since Monday morning.
Chris was super excited.
I'm very excited. Of course I am. I mean, what a thrill.
Mm. How did you each find out about the nomination this year?
Sandy called me because we'd just done the Critics' Choice Award the
night before and actually got quite drunk.
and I sort of forgot about the nomination, and the phone rang in the hotel room very early, and I thought, what's on? And then on the other end of the phone, it was like, Christopher. And I was like, what's wrong? And she said, well, you've been nominated for an Oscar. I'm going back to bed.
I actually said, I can't speak. But I'd been woken up by my phone buzzing by the bed, which I thought I'd put on complete silence. And it was a friend of mine, Terry Kane, who's been working with us on publicity, who actually called to tell me. And I didn't even know what was going on. I was completely phased and hungover, like I said. I had enough energy to call Christopher and tell him.
Well, obviously, since how did you guys come to work together on this film? I know you've worked together on The Wolf of Wall Street in the past, but what brought you together for The Irishman?
Well, I started with Sandy on The Departed as a shopper, and we've been working together off and on ever since then. And then The Irishman came up.
And then The Irishman came up for me at the tail end of, I was working in London on Mary Poppins and The Favourite at the same time. And I wasn't able to start it immediately. I also was rather daunted by the sort of sheer scale of it. And I thought I can only take this on if I am working with either a fabulous assistant who I've known for many years. Well, that's what I initially thought of. I needed a fabulous assistant. I didn't know any because Christopher, having started out as my assistant, then obviously has been a designer in his own right for many years. But I actually couldn't think of anybody else I wanted to work with, so I approached Christopher and asked if he would co-design with me. And that's how we came to be working together, and it worked incredibly well because we already have a relationship. We already know how we both work, and we have a love.
Yep.
Yeah. No hesitations, Chris?
To work on a Scorsese film with Sandy Powell. Yeah. I said, let me get back to you next week. There were absolutely no hesitations. I mean, working on a Marty film and working with Sandy, it's always a joy. And like Sandy said, the main component of why it works and, why I'm in the room is because we're friends and we share a common aesthetic, and we don't really agree necessarily on everything. A lot of times we don't, but we just keep talking about it until eventually, we do, or one of us does.
It's not with marriage. There are good bits and bad. We bicker as well and solve it, but on the whole we get on.
What's something you disagreed with on The Irishman?
Oh goodness.
Oh God.
It wouldn't be anything serious.
Yeah.
No, it's not. When I say we don't necessarily agree on everything, it's a lot of it is like the devil is in the details, because it's like it's by degree. Is it this suit or that suit, or should we use this tie now, or should we use this tie later? And there's never a moment where we have like a cat fight or something. It's just
it might be something that maybe that there'd be. I mean, I think what happened at the beginning was that you would be concentrating on something that I would then turn around and say, we're never going to see that.
Right. And
that's going to be off camera, that bit, or that's not the bit that we should be concentrating on.
And then I would dive into a piece of research and say, actually, we really need to think about this. And it's just the way it is. I mean, we've talked about this a little bit. I mean, Sandy's quite an instinctual designer and doesn't necessarily talk anything to death. I will talk everything to death.
I don't overthink it.
And I will overthink everything, and I will over-research everything. And we meet somewhere in the middle.
Do you think those sort of like little disagreements, but also different approaches, make for a better final product?
Definitely, because it makes you think more, rather than just going straight away with your first decision, which quite often is right anyway. But I mean, if somebody questions you, it makes you have a look at it again, and quite often you can come up with a better solution. You can come up, solve the problem in a clearer, more defined way.
I mean, the other thing, the entire time we were doing the film, the volume of it was as such that there were times when we weren't together, but we came together and then separated, and then came back together and separated on various things. Like sometimes, like there was a point where I was in Miami and Sandy was in London, but in all cases, I mean, all of the decisions we talked about, and it's very fluid, and it's very hard to understand. And I think a lot of people sort of go, how does that work? But
it's not like we sit down and draw a picture together and design a costume actually, together. It doesn't work like that, does it?
Yeah, not yet. It hasn't done that.
Yeah. What part of the Irishman are you most proud of about the costume design in particular?
All of it.
All of it.
All of it.
There's no one. Excuse me, I'm going to cough.
Yeah.
I think just the fact that we achieved it, that we got through it, something on that scale, and I believe it's been successful.
Yeah.
Well, what was the most challenging thing to get right?
The fit of all of those suits and making a very clear distinction between the men, in the fit of their suit and the choice of their tie, and that was one of them. And
also, of course, the whole de-aging thing. Our contribution to the de-aging of the actors, especially Bob. We didn't really know how that was going to work and if it was going to work, and then I think it was successful in the end.
Yeah. So they were real costumes, weren't they? It wasn't like you got brand new suits and they de-aged the suits to like.
No,
a combination of bespoke suits that we made according to whatever period the men were in, and a combination of suits, and really the de-aging process. I mean, I imagine there are little cleanups, around the neckline, and they worked on the face, but generally speaking, the
clothes weren't really touched.
No,
the clothes are all real,
and that was the challenge, because we had to imagine what the de-aged actor was going to look like, dress them appropriately for the age that they were meant to be, which is not it's not a huge difference, but there are little touches here and there that were important, to dress a certain man of a certain age in a certain way.
Yeah, and I think an interesting thing about the Irishman too is it does take place over different time periods and stretch out and things like that. So I imagine it was that challenging, making those like subtle changes to costumes as you were dealing with different years.
Well, some of the changes are subtle, and some of them are completely different because it was over 5 decades, and there are very distinctive look. Round about the middle to end of each decade, you can actually see the change from 10 years before. But the subtle differences are when you go from the end of the 50s into the early 60s, the end of the 60s into the early 70s. That's when the changes are really subtle. And it was actually quite complicated keeping abreast of all of that and actually remembering where you were, because sometimes, some days we were shooting different periods, different ends of decades or different decades completely in one day. And we had crowds of extras in dressed, and you sort of had to really think about where you were, where the hemline was, which shirts, which ties we were doing, which shirts we were doing that day.
Yeah, and Sandy, with you having had like 15 Oscar nominations or 14 nominations before this, some could say maybe it was a weak year for you. You only got 1 nomination this year, unlike last year where you picked up 2. What was different? Yeah. What was different for you this year, or what was different for you about this film than other films you've been nominated for in the past?
Quite a lot, actually. Number one, I was completely and utterly gobsmacked that we got nominated. It's not to say that I don't think the film deserves to get nominated. It deserves everything it's got, I think. But I was really surprised that the costumes got nominated, because normally this isn't the kind of film that gets nominated for costume design. Simply because it's fairly ordinary clothing. It's guys in suits, over many decades, but there's nothing flashy or showy or wild or sparkly about it. Normally, I would say normally the films that get nominated for costumes are period. This is a period film, sort of earlier periods. They normally have quite a few female characters in gowns, or they're sort of heavily stylized or very colourful. So the fact that quite a sort of low-key looking film has been nominated for costume, I'm really, really thrilled about. It's something that I've banged on about for years, actually, that films like this and contemporary films never get considered for costume awards, because people don't even see contemporary clothing as costume, which they are. And they're just as difficult and challenging to do as a big period film.
Yeah. Were you the one, Sandy, who said that when you won for the Young Victoria?
That was what I said yes, that was part of my acceptance speech. I dedicated it to all those designers that don't design films about dead monarchs or have lots of glitter in them.
Yeah, no, that was one of my favourite speeches, because it made me think about a part of filmmaking that I hadn't before, the contemporary costume designers. And I imagine and you've worked on contemporary stuff too, like, to make modern clothes look lived in would be quite a tricky thing as well. Yeah.
Exactly. Make them look lived in and believable. And it's just as difficult. You're still making decisions. You're still making artistic design decisions, and quite often building costumes and designing them from scratch. It's the same way as you do with a big, huge ball gown in the 18th century.
Yeah, and the common denominator between period and contemporary films is character, and that's what you build. And it's not just about the clothes; it's about the subtle details, and the way the clothing is worn that helps build the scaffolding underneath the characters that the actors and the director are, trying to portray on screen. It's equally as difficult. It's exactly as difficult. Yeah,
which goes back to why I'm kind of really extremely proud of getting this nomination, and really thrilled that it actually has been noticed.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, no, very much so. And Christopher, what is it like designing costumes for a Martin Scorsese film and designing costumes for Marty?
Well, it's incredibly exciting. Everything that I've been a part of, with Sandy, all of Marty's films, there's always an angle, because he's a very visual director, and he's very specific. He provides a lot of specific, takes on things and direction. And so, it's a privilege, and it's thrilling, to get to work with this cast. Come on.
Yeah, no, pretty cool. What do you think? How involved is Marty in the costume designing process? Does he have a lot of notes? Does he give a lot of free to how does he approach that sort of thing? Because I imagine different directors would approach it a bit differently.
Sorry, we just got interrupted. I got distracted then because housekeeping.
Oh no!
Sorry.
Oh no, that's fine.
I think how many in the room?
1
hour and 1 hour.
And so for all of the viewers out there, we just want you to know this is the real glamour of being, Oscar nominated. It really is.
Yeah. There you go. That's what it's called.
Question again.
Yeah. With Marty and Redfield, is he the kind of director that gives a lot of notes for costumes, or how does that work? Because I imagine different directors would be different with how they
are. All directors are different. What you get from Marty is a lot of information up front, especially about the character, and sometimes specifically about clothes and the kind of clothes that he wants his characters to wear. So the very first thing he said to us was that these guys aren't, yes, they're gangsters and all the rest of it, but they're not the Goodfellas gangsters. They're not the casino ones. These are much more under the radar. They're not flashy. So it's everything that it's nothing to do with those looks from those earlier films. He knows a lot about clothes. He knows a lot about costume. So you get a lot of information up front. But then the nice thing is that we're just left to get on. with it, and sort of go our own way. And then, of course, we include Marty in every decision, in that we'll then show him all the fitting pictures and he'll look at them and we'll get feedback in that way. And it's always very positive and a very interesting process.
I mean, we had a very funny meeting, our first meeting with Marty after we'd done a group of fittings with, I think, Al, Bob, and Joe. We went to Marty's house and we'd prepared, a folder of, fitting photos. And he was like, he whipped him and was like, yep, oh, tie, yep. And then he would stop on something. And that was sort of like the cue of like, maybe this one will change. He's like, what about that tie? And we were like, we'll get another tie. And then he just flipped through the rest of them and he was like, that's great, that's great.
And usually the only things we're asked to change is a tie. It's never anything. It's never anything bigger than that. So of course we always make sure there are plenty of other tie options.
Yeah. Well, also, we're an Oscars website. We cover the awards. Sandy, you have not just been we talked about your nominations, but you've won 3 Oscars too. What was it like winning that first Oscar for Shakespeare in Love? And you can touch on the other 2 that you won as well for. You won, and also for a Martin Scorsese film, The Aviator. So you've already won for a Marty film as well.
Yeah. I did. The first one, it was sort of like an out-of-body experience. I actually don't remember how I got from my seat to the stage. I really don't remember. I do remember standing there and looking out and thinking, oh my God. I just don't remember how I spoke or what happened. It was, and then of course afterwards was brilliant. It was incredibly exciting and really good fun. And everybody talks to you because you're holding a little gold statue.
That's cool. And Christopher, what would it mean for you to either for this film or another film one day win your first Oscar?
This is going to sound disingenuous, but I guarantee you it's not. And I was talking to Sandy about this last night. I mean, of course, it would be amazing, and I'm curious to see what that would feel like, now or one day in the future. But I already feel like I've already won, honestly. And I know that sounds really gross, but I got to make a great film with Marty, with that cast, with my friend Sandy, and it looks great. It's being appreciated. So, hey man, like we'll see, but I'm good. Like mission accomplished.
That's nice. And what do you guys think the best thing is about The Irishman as a film?
Ooh.
You're talking in general.
Yeah, just in general. It can be the costumes if you want. But
I actually love the fact that it's 3.5 hours long. It's like a good old-fashioned epic.
I think as well. I mean, the film is. I think people they thought the film was going to be something quite different than it turned out. But what it is, it's a reflection on. It's Marty's reflection on. A life, this character, Frank Sheeran, a life that, you have to live with your choices. I mean, it's like, it's such a beautifully realized film. And it's so different than in tone than so many of Marty's films that have gone before this. And Marty's spoken very eloquently about, finding yourself at the end of your life, reflecting on all that you've done and the time that's left, and in particular to Frank, everything that he had with, because he didn't go out with flash, he didn't go out, when some mob hit or some dramatic way. He died alone in a nursing home. Very teary. It's a comedy, really.
Yeah, no, very much so. And are you guys going to work on anything together in the future? Is there anything in the pipeline?
We don't know yet.
Maybe.
Yeah. See, there we go. So, yeah. Well, guys, thanks so much for talking with us today and sharing a bit about The Irishman and your nomination. All the best for the Oscars. And for people watching this chat, you can go to goldderby.com where you can make your own Oscar predictions in categories like Best Costume Design and get into the forums and read articles about how the Oscars and see other interviews with award contenders.